and shared screen. Yes, Martin has glasses. Now we look like a proper professional presence of things. Hopefully you see through them. And
No, not.
um, and let's see. So I will first show you a semi-random, well, not completely random. But also not really all that designed collection of images. And I want to show you through them really quickly, just to like maybe give you some mental pointers of which you might pick. Um, and and these are the kind of the boards, and after showing them, I will go to the topics of how to potentially play with the boards. But let's have this as a kind of introduction or prelude to the actual game moves. So this will be just a quick run through of different senses of human life. And that was the round. So now, upon these potential game boards slash cards slash pseudo environments or emulations of environments, uh, I was thinking also having film clips to have a little bit better simulations of environments, but I think it's maybe easier to work with this sort of flattened ones. I would propose three moves. Well, some of the moves of these three also kind of break down into other moves, but to start simply, maybe three. So first one is the move of making or creating a card. And well, I probably need to break that down a bit. So the move of making a card can start simply as making a title. So let's say from this image, I take the row of these glasses in a kind of loose sense, not like a strict frame, but this sort of how there is almost like a row of glasses, a different kind of glassware happening. And then if I was tongue in cheek, I could simply name it the cheap version of time. That could be a title. So now this row of glassware could be titled cheap version of time. I could also name it like time as nesting reflections, and a different branchway, different rabbit hole would be opened. Now, another move could be to describe underneath this title or any other title. Like if this one was now actually nesting reflections of time, somebody could start describing that there is the nests are containing the whole room. In some cases, in others, they are rejecting the room and pushing it back. One could have a debate whether that's kind of like slightly paradoxical. It doesn't really matter. It could be now added to still as a description to that, and it's a little bit like the title would be almost like this tarotic meaning, but now released or relinquished to be only for the card, but utilizing a similar expression towards even an element of anything. Now we're of course using images, but this could be in real life or even for a sound or a moment in a cafe, whatever. But then this description is almost like giving more meaning to it, but at the same time maybe offering more depth to how to think about it. Um, uh, Now, of course, it's also possible to do a move of titling something else. Like, let's say there was this move um, of making this title under the title Nested Reflection of Time and some descriptions to it, but somebody could say, uh, frame the left side of the image having this darkened area and the right side of the image having this lightened area, and simply title this the softened versions of light and darkness. And now this would become another rabbit hole, another nested topic here, um, to build, which could complement the nested reflections of time or play its own game in a way. Now the but of course, like if they complement, they are building this meaning in itself. And of course, it's possible then to think that we are kind of almost like creating a card out of this image, and that's not a bad thought. But I would also emphasize that there is actually more flexibility here, uh, because we're using images because it's an easier medium here. And while it's actually interesting to make one image into a card, we can really think of this almost like these kind of card-like meanings unraveling, and they don't necessarily have to kind of make a whole frame out of it. But okay, so that is the move of a card. But there is another move which I slightly tongue-in-cheek called the sept, from concept, also from the word accept. But I like the word sept, which has this sort of meaning of to grasp, as a kind of relinquishing the utter dominance of the concept of concept. So, like slightly renaming this area and saying sept almost like creates this sort of suggestion that there's something larger than concepts. But nevertheless, like here, septs can be thought kind of like concept moves. But as a concept move, I could simply say on top of this, say emotions. And this I'm not placing anywhere, or maybe I'm placing this to the game space in itself. Like I'm placing a concept into the air, and of course that could then turn out to be the thematic of how we play, or somebody could use it in another way. But I'm almost like placing into the air of the game the some sept. Of course, it doesn't have to be one word. It can be a phrase, maybe something else as well. But it's kind of playing septually into a space that plays also cardfully, I guess. And of course, there is a lot of overlap between these two things, but I think their individual existence still makes sense, even if there is some overlap. Finally, the third move is question. That is, one can ask a question specifically about what's in the environment, but also what's in play. Like even a question, what are we doing next? But also like, what do you think is interesting about the colors? Or uh, or a question like, should we play towards a multitude or a singular image, like whatever the question. So just to open this possibility of playing the question. And those are the simple rules for now. Very, very moldable, plasticky, but highly kind of towards the expression. And there is no strict turn order. Like anybody can make a move. I think it's more like a space of politeness. If somebody makes too many moves, they should give some space to others. Uh, uh, and those are the kind of rough rules for now. So making a card which can have this sort of titling through framing, like framing the glasses here or glassware, and then titling that to, say, nested reflections of time. And then those titles in the frames can nest into them descriptions that can deepen them. And then the sets, like just floating about into the game concepts or questions. Okay, any questions on the game? Meta questions on these rules?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Last time we in last session we spoke about the difference between constructing the cards and playing the cards into the space. Is what you're suggesting now? I mean, it certainly appears to be a constructive, like a generative card generation protocol, so to speak. Is that step 1 of 2, or do you also suggest that following a couple of rounds of playing these moves, we would go into a kind of throwing of these cards that we create?
Or playing the cards into. Yes, that's the soft intention, soft meaning, like
it's a question as much as also on timing now of this, so that we kind of get to it.
Yeah, so also like not to put too much stuff in the beginning reasons, but like one possibility is once cards are created and there are other sources of material, like the possibility also comes to play the card that we have created earlier. And one could, of course, expand this if there was another set of cards to play cards upon the cards, but just to keep this nice and tidy, these are the starting rules, like making cards, throwing in the concepts, questions, but once the sort of senses of a card are created, they can be played further later.
Yeah, I would, if I may throw a crumb of interest, or like in this point, I would be very like curious to try and like see what would happen if we take a card that we have made, maybe now today, and then throw it at one of these other environments that you also there collected, and just try what happens in that kind of confrontation.
Yeah, definitely. But let's introduce that potentially later. Like, let's keep it now also, because this also brings Hedayat on the same table in equal terms, because we are playing with the material that we have. So yeah. Any other questions? Needs of clarification also possible, because that's always a possibility.
What is the action player right now? What action right now should player do?
So these 3 moves are available for all the players. Like going into card making, there's framing / titling, and then describing. Then throwing in a set that is concept phrase into the air of the play, like if I throw the word emotions or color shades, then it's up to other players how they think they include it in their play, but you can throw such a thing in. Or a question. Like in a way that when I was explaining this, when I made the card direction like this, like framing this sort of glassware running on the table and calling it nested reflections of time, this was a move. And also, like I would say, we don't certainly have to start from this image. This was one of the reasons why I wanted to show you the other images, to give you the choice of let's pick another starting point. So that's a possibility. Would you like to pick another starting point? We can browse through them, and you can say stop, for example.
It is my turn based. It's my turn or Martin.
No, it's
certainly
not,
your turn.
It's like game nerdifying. We could call this move based, which is like anybody can start a move. There is no turn order per se, but when you start a move, people usually respect that you get your move done, kind of thing. So yeah, more dynamic. But like, let's say for the start, like to select the board, I propose that, and that was just my camera tilting out. I'm still here. That we could like scroll through these, and then you can say, either of you, to stop on a certain image, and we can choose from where to start. Which one?
The one before.
This one.
This one.
Would you agree, Hedayat, or do you want to continue?
I wanted the previous one. No, this one. No, back. Yes, it is a rabbit hole. No, it is a rabbit hole we were talking. Yeah, connect.
This one.
Yes.
All right. So we can play one after the other. Also, that's a possibility. Any I don't really have a vote on this because I've been like tinkling with the rules anyway, so I can start from either. Your
This
turn.
is great. This is great.
All right, we can start from this, and now we have the moves, the card making with framing. The framing doesn't have to be strictly visual. It can also be, I frame the emotions in this image, and that's still a frame. And title these emotions something.
Can I title it?
Yes. When you title, also always frame what you title. Like, of course, you can title the whole thing, but it's often useful to think, like, first, what is the element from it you are titling?
Mm-hmm. My element, the title, I'm gonna call it a rabbit hole, and exactly algorithmic rabbit hole. And I see the element that it is the way that the row is coming from the wall under the ground. So I see the confusion of the confusion that cannot reach to a certain place. It is the things I can say, the emotional and also the title.
Martin, do you want to play another move? I'm intentionally leaving myself last because I've talked enough.
I was thinking to title it also. I'm not sure.
You can like they can.
Yeah, no, I know what, like, Hedayat, would you repeat, because I'm not sure that I caught what you said as a title.
Algorithmic rabbit hole.
Oh, this is that's the title for this image then.
Yes.
Okay, check. Yes. Okay. Let me just see. I just want to note that. So let me get back to you. I thought of it as a kind of like to title it in a sense of an activity, which this is not explored at all, but that just popped to mind when I looked at the picture. An activity card, so to speak, with the title Noodling.
are you titling also the whole image, or?
Yes, I would be titling the whole image. I would be specifically, the image would be kind of a representation of that activity called noodling.
Okay, that's allowed, but I strongly recommend using the framing, because I can assure you it will be more powerful tool with the framing itself. But we can start from, so
hang on. Okay, so like let me kind of, you know, train that. So if I'd be, so I guess it's obvious what I'm referring to, because it's a very simple visual link that I'm making here. So, but like I would be framing kind of the act that I take this person in the picture to be in the process of performing.
the act, okay, the act that the person is in the process of performing.
Yes.
Okay, I'll frame, and these can overlap and even branch out. You can take somebody's creation and make a new version of it. But I will actually frame the from the black spray patterns, the fact that there are these sort of like almost like snaking, serpentining tunnels, and generally like the kind of outpouring of them, and I would title it Architectures of Rabbit Holes, Case 73.
Case 73?
Yeah.
Can I ask more detail about case 73? Or
so you're asking descriptions, but that's fine. Like because we're not in a turn order, so we can play. So that's the title. Of course, as a meta answer, I could say, to keep things clear, I intentionally made it case 73 simply to point out that there are other cases, many of them. So in a way, you could call it like a poetic license would be a way to say it, to call it case 73. But here I could say that the maybe it was also because, like, yeah, there is this, I think there is a sense to rabbit holes that there is serpentine, that is, they almost like fold over themselves while continuing forward. But I don't think it's some kind of universal general rule. Therefore, it's a case. And maybe as a description, I would say like this case of the serpentining highlights the folding, forward moving quality of rabbit holes. That's my addition to its description.
Can you, am I on mic? Can you say again, Pekko, what it was that you were framing?
The kind of serpentining shapes of the graffiti, like I don't know if you see my cursor.
I see them, yes.
Yeah. So this is an example, but of course you can see serpentining in many ways here.
And the title was again?
Architectures of Rabbit Holes, case 73.
There's a comma before case, right?
Potentially, yes. I think it's yeah, probably sounds better with the comma, or reads.
and can I also, as a player, add more extra to your description, or
yes, yes, you can.
No, it's really interesting. I see the similarity between the things, because for me, at the first glance, it was a rabbit hole, But when I look at it, I recognize all these patterns are not coming from the same one. So based on the different element, like some of them are seemed old to me, some of them with different sprays.
Mm.
And that's why I mentioned algorithmic rabbit hole, because it is just following others in my subconscious. And you exactly mentioned K73s. It means this is the 70 breeds. It means I saw some connection between two
Mhm.
frames that I really enjoyed.
Yes, yeah. I agree with it. And in a way, like these different titles, even though, okay, mine was framed somewhere for the whole image, but I don't think there is really a problem that even like titling or even describing the titles for the same thing, because it's more like parallel realities or multiple meanings kind of a situation. It actually is complementary potentially. Any other moves?
I think I would like then to take a shot at trying to describe, basically kind of flesh out of it,
Yeah.
the title.
Yeah.
And I haven't thought about it. I just just remember that that's what I wanted to do.
Mm.
So I guess when I titled the part of the picture, which was again the act that the person appears to be in the process of performing, when I gave that the title noodling,
Mm.
I guess I was referring to a type of behavior that I could imagine in a space, in a also physical, shared, whatever space. It could also be, just coming to my mind, a kind of a band practice or something, where any let's say person or actor or agent would go off on a narrowly contained, almost kind of condomed like, and I think we go back to like I also kind of go and return to the rabbit hole spatiality in a way that would kind of play out in a kind of fastish way, potentially unconcerned, like unconcerned with what else is going about in that moment. And yeah, kind of basically I was always going to say kind of following its own path, but of course that's the path that has not been made, so it would be also kind of making its own path as you go, with a kind of wet noodle type property that it could be picked up by anybody subsequently to that performance.
Picked up in...
like a wet noodle, like you put
okay, yeah,
you throw a wet noodle on the wall or on a pot or something that way, and then it's there and it kind of maybe peels off a bit due to gravity, and then it can be picked up and taken forward in some manner. There's all sorts of kind of physicalities that attach to it if you add a bit more time, but like that would be it.
I make a really quick move because it kind of comes from your move, and it is I frame your title noodling, because it's possible to frame something else than the image, so I'm kind of underlining that quality. So I'm framing a title to your title noodling, and the title is Process Architectures Case 17, maybe, noodling. A wet noodling, yes. And really, you describe, if I would add a description, I won't go into it now, but you kind of describe a description already for it, that in a way, like going to a rabbit hole in the manner of a wet noodle to leave that noodle to others.
Yeah, so you were just saying what process architectures?
Yeah, now process architectures of rabbit holes, case 17, wet noodling. So the word process was added. But the earlier was architectures of rabbit holes.
Right. So basically, in a sense, you're enclosing or you're including
Or nesting.
yeah, well, that would be the kind of cybernetic way of saying it, and I was more thinking the institutional way. You're kind of including noodling or wet noodling as a kind of it just got into a collection, right? That's what you began. Or like, I mean, it's not you're not beginning it because it's already case 17.
Yeah.
So like it clearly is now part of a kind of possibly growing, possibly certainly pre-existing catalog of rabbit hole architecture techniques or methods, if we were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm implying it.
No, yeah, well, I mean, like I haven't asked you. Could I ask you as a question? I can ask a question.
Yeah, question is a move.
Question, Pekko. Do you recall, would you describe to me this the case number 13 of the catalog of process architectures of rabbit holes?
I see you already know how to play the question, because question is intentionally open, because you can yes, exactly, like you can kind of use it for fictional reasons. So that's a very good case 13, you say?
13 is what the one I wanted to know.
Process architecture of well, I can't remember what is the word, but it's the it's between saturating and scattering. I think that word exists, like you know, like it's actually present in the picture. You can see it sort of here around this particular line. There is this sort of how there is a scatter pattern that saturates a space. Like so so in the case 13 is this scatter saturations, I think is the name. And it's this how you become to a comprehension of space by spots in that space.
Let me just be clear that I understand what exactly scattering means. So scattered means like if I pour out, and I'm not at all referencing a real event that might or might not have played out in my home, a cup of needles, then they scatter on the floor, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So like, and so what you're kind of suggesting here, the word between scattering and saturating is like, if I continue doing that, at some point I have saturated the floor with needles. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or even if you scatter those needles, or let's take a bag of rice, which has a lot of things that scatter, like, and you throw it intentionally to the space to have a kind of coverage of it, but in a scattered manner, that would be,
Yeah, like it's a bit, like rain.
It's also like, I think there is really even a scientific name for it, is this sort of scatter space mapping, that you're doing spots in itself, but we don't need to go there.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah. But then it's kind of a sampling thing, huh? Like.
Yeah, but I'm kind of intentionally not going exactly to that, because I think there is room around it. Like there are more patterns than the scientific patterns. It's a heavy relation to that, but also a little bit different or looser.
Yeah.
So that was a good question move, I would say.
Like, do I get points?
You get like 1 one foot into the rabbit hole.
Boot.
Foot, like the
Foot.
measure, the
Or like
33.
okay, so I'm advancing 1 foot into the rabbit hole. Okay.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you can read it that way. It's just 1 foot into the rabbit hole. That's just the name of it. But you can read it
Oh.
as if you
I
have.
like the misunderstanding of boot. I did
Okay,
like
okay.
1 boot into the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't care about points anymore,
Mm.
but like it's good. I just want 1 point. That's what I want. That's all I want.
Mhm. People are
Yeah.
often, yes, I know. Like,
Yeah.
but it's nice to sometimes make points because, like, they also offer new dimensions. Like, playfully, 1 boot or foot into the rabbit hole is an interesting dimension of the game of rabbit holes, like that you're getting deeper.
Yeah, the reason I want to kind of a bit shy back from accepting that is that in my head, it creates a very much like Mensch ärgere dich nicht, you know, like a figure on the board type of thing. And I'm not sure that I want to, like for myself personally, have that kind of structure in my head as we play now. But that's just me being handicapped. So
Yeah, but now you're verging into the case 7, which is sidetracking of process patterns into rabbit
yeah,
holes.
it was
Uh,
being,
yeah, this is sidetracking because you already point out a very interesting game structure, which is points as offers plus acceptance, because most of the games just order points. Like you get points. I got points. I cannot do anything about it. But you
yeah.
can do points and other structures as offers and acceptances, and that's a whole
Interesting.
sidetrack. Which
I didn't say that I reject the boot, but I would have just liked 1 point.
all right, okay. Now we're still sidetracking. Any other moves? Hidayat, you can also throw in accept, like over the process, over the image, or make a question.
Question, no, I don't have. But I don't know, in my turn, can I ask for the change the card or go next?
Yeah, this is a kind of meta possibility. We can always, I think it actually makes sense because we have a lot. I think there is 2 qualities here. Like there is an interesting quality if you play one source deeper, that's a possibility, but also we don't have to make it this. So we can change. So let's put it now in the among the moves. Like you can also ask to change the material, change the environment or the scene. Let's call it change the scene. And I have to do some, yes, now. There was this proposal, but because you asked for change the scene, you can also ask for others. So I'm just scrolling.
Yeah, the previous one that the Martin selected was like previous, yes.
This one?
Yes, I think Martin.
Yeah. I have a move, but I'm intentionally trying to give space because otherwise I'd just oversaturate it.
I would also have an attempt anyway,
Mm-hmm.
but I can also wait.
No, go ahead.
So I don't know exactly what attracted me to the image. I think somehow it had to do with some kind of clarity of it, this kind of almost kind of somewhat of an immateriality that it exudes to me. But now looking at it again, I see, or I think that I see, I'm not sure, but I think that I see that somehow these columns and arches and surfaces of the vault they appear to be not maybe translucent, but maybe they are, I would like to imagine them to be made from this kind of punched metal.
Yes.
And so I thought about, this is again kind of a bit of an activity. Okay, so I'm thinking about titling this again. Sorry, that's repetitive, but still I like it, like maybe for the time being. Or I like it, but it came to my mind that like this, a bit like of an activity thing, like to kind of fill out the space behind those surfaces in a way that could maybe be called. So again, what I'm framing, I think, is the space kind of within these punched metal sheets, and the title that I would suggest would be foaming. In like, do you know this PU, polyurethane foam, that you use in buildings to, that you spray in and it kind of it goes up and it makes, basically it fills very exactly up the space, and then it can spill over. But this kind of, so what I guess what I'm trying to invoke is this kind of motion of kind of beginning to sit at a spot, and then from there expansively foaming into a void that has been left in the space, that has somehow been left in the space.
Can
So
I ask?
maybe expansive foaming should be the term. Yeah.
Can I ask, are you thinking of doing the foaming that is not yet there, or are you thinking the foaming is there? Just as a clarification.
No, I would be thinking, so I'm thinking this as a card. So that means that I'm also thinking that it could be played at a point.
Yes.
So I'm kind of trying to consider that that it would also function that way, or in such a situation. So what I'm trying to kind of come up with, I guess, is an act or a motion that could be performed in a given situation. And obviously now here I begin speaking, I'm kind of stimulated by a visual of a supposedly physical space, but it could also be applied to any kind of conceptual gap left somewhere, or other kind of voids that would appear in a situation, in an environment. And so I'm thinking, to answer your question, of doing the filling. So if I would be thinking of the card. If one plays it, then that would mean that one goes about filling up, beginning like expansively filling up. So beginning from one point possibly to fill up and try to kind of fill out maybe a space, a void that had been there prior to that.
So in a way, like framed, almost like a card of its own of foaming, or what was the title you wanted to?
Yeah, I think I said that expansive, like with an A.
Yeah, expansive.
Foaming.
Yeah. Yes. And that is an interesting thought, and kind of like a, as you said, opens up to a card of its own in itself, like what is this sort of expansive foam filling? I'm trying to make a word that combines foaming and filling. Falling. Anyway, but that area that you're as an action, like, and what does it mean? Like for Hedaya, this is kind of like also, and maybe to other listeners, if there are such, to this video at any given potential of time, that the one dimension we have played with this sort of cards is also how cards start to also behave really like in the area where concepts play, like that they define something to the world like an operation, and start to kind of not just name the thing, but actually kind of give give a linchpin, like an anchor to an operation that doesn't exist before in itself, which is kind of a quality that Martin is doing, at least from my point of view. If he disagrees, he can certainly disagree. But just to kind of illustrate or clarify that bit. But I like this, like because you're also playing. One advanced thing is you're utilizing this material in a very, like, you're not super faithful to it, which is good. Like, you're kind of using a certain quality to it, extracting or framing that, and then creating something else out of it, which is of course completely possible and interesting in itself. Like that, the fact that it has this sort of spaces implied by the punched hole metal. Hidayat, any moves you want to make? I'm still holding back to give both of you space.
So I didn't write Martin here, the title. Martin, can you again tell me your title? You put it here.
Yeah, it was expansive.
Expansive.
Foaming.
Bone?
Foaming.
Foaming.
Yeah.
Foaming.
Oh,
Like shaving foam or.
So the foaming of the. I want to ask more about foaming.
Yes.
Oh, was that a question or?
Yes, from my question.
Yeah.
To me or
Yes, to
okay.
you.
How about, okay, so Pekko, could you also answer? I mean, I can answer it, but I'm just like for structural curiosity.
Yeah. Game wise,
The
you're
question
completely
can be-
okay. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's fine for a question to say, I'm addressing to you on
Yeah.
this. Like, and you can say as an answer that, okay, I'm actually including Pekko as well. Like, I think these are good additions to the question move. So,
Yeah, because I have to say that in the previous case, I very much enjoyed how each of us took a different angle at the image we were dealing with there. And so kind of in a sense now that I gave a bit of, so the one thing that I don't want to do is to kind of preempt or kind of occupy bandwidth or like thought of stuff that you would wish to say. On the other hand, I would be curious to hear, Pekko, you answer that question, if that's inside of what you wish to be doing.
no, certainly. I mean, like I said, these are drafted moves, and these are very, like, this is meta comment. Like, as is typical for every move that has a lot of expressive power, that it becomes a skill-based move. This is a rule of thumb, by the way, for the games in general. Like, if a move that you can do in the game has a lot of expressive power, it always has a kind of inherent element of skill. So now that all of our moves are very expressive, like there's a lot of range. So there's a whole play of skill, and that's to be, I think, embraced, that we kind of play around with what are the kind of contours of these moves to play around with the expressive power. Okay, so meta comment over. So
I'm not sure that Pekko understood. Sorry, if understood that the move was over, but still clinging on a bit to that meta thing. I'm not sure that I exactly understand in what way you use the term skill here, or the concept of skill at this point.
So, like, okay, like if you think of writing, there is a lot of things you can write. Therefore, it becomes a matter of skill. It's that simple in itself.
Right.
Yeah, like and chess, there is a lot of moves you can do. In a way, it's expressive to do certain moves. Therefore, it becomes a matter of skill.
Right.
And the more limited the space is, you can do really only one thing. The skill starts to wane down. And this actually, even though it seems like kind of very meta, it's actually very rule of thumb in games. Immediately when something is more expressive, it becomes more and more reflective of skill. But also not just necessarily one dimension of skill, but potentially many dimensions of skill. you can use sometimes in games, this is still not the meta comment, to put those skills in one dimension by, say, putting a winning condition, which means that all the skills have to push towards the winning condition, and now you're narrowing the branching of skills. But because we don't have a winning condition, the branching is available, so Martin can play in a different, develop his skills and play in a very different way than I do, because we don't have like a final, like a bottleneck squeeze point, of this is how you win. So like these are actually like qualities that go to super traditional games as well, and I thought they are good to point out because they appear in these kind of games as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
the counter example would be if a move is do one push-up, like you have hardly any. I mean, you have to have the skill of doing one push-up, but that's it. Like,
yeah,
it's not. Yeah, check it. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, but the question was hear more about foaming. This was the, and you passed it to me.
Yes.
So, of course, I'm answering from my side because I don't exactly know what Martin means by foaming, but he has his complete freedom to make his own direction. But for me, like, actually, I have this sort of continuation from this scatter saturation, which I started to call scatterating, by the way. And I think that's the actual case theme, scatterating. Then there is a continuum from scatterating to this foaming. But what interests me in the foaming is that the foam space is essentially filled by a distribution of air and shapes in between. Like all foam, whether it's hardened foam or soft foam, has like bubbles of air, and then it has this sort of bridges, tangles, threads, essentially. Like at the same time, what another interesting quality of foam is that it often has like a fairly even outer surface. That it might live, it might like foams might pop and it might change its shape, but you can see there is the foam. And this is the interesting quality about foaming, that it's seeking this shape that is produced not as a uniform, but kind of threading a network inside to form a shape that gives sort of a facade illusion of like a complete shape, but really is formed out of constellated network. And this is a quality, this is still my description, that is actually much more common in human processes of meaning than we often think. That we often are creating a sense of a full surface, when actually what is underneath is a network of constellations. And that foaming is producing something with the full knowledge of this quality.
Very nice. Can I send a postcard from it? Can I send a postcard from another discussion to this discussion?
Of course. Meta move. Certainly
meta move. Just hooking this into this kind of how to say, somewhat kind of connection, not unknown connection or known connection between the network and the terrain. I think this is an interesting one in there between those.
Yeah,
but that's it. Closing it off.
And then, like, noticing, Heda, at your message that you have to move in about 7-8 minutes. I would kind of create like a. I mean, there is a lot to play. Like, there is an infinity to play here, but I would kind of create this sort of point of maybe drawing some lines of what we've seen so far from this fairly short example, because I do think there are some interesting, not conclusions, but here's what we learned so far kind of things. Like, first of all, the one thing I wanted to highlight is that here we're tapping, you could even say exploiting what is a kind of conceptual space. But because we're putting different operations on it, we're exploiting it to different usage. You could make a very rough comparison that it's almost like tarot card-like, but it's also more expansive. It's certainly like more flexible than, okay, here's your deck of tarot cards and read this card in itself. It's actually much more generative in nature. And this relates to an earlier conversation with you, Martin, I think last week actually, about these portals, and which also contain portal/rabbit hole as a concept, is like how making this card-like things or card-like behaviors, like happens with this title and framing, is almost like a parallel to conceptual operations, but has a more rabbit hole portal-like quality, in like that you're jumping off into a different thing, like you're recalibrating the meaning, not just like pinning a needle down, so to speak.
This is interesting, yeah.
And I think that's happened, like in here, even with this little setup.
Let me just pin something to that, if you don't mind, because the way that, sorry, but Hedayat, you only have a few minutes, so I shouldn't be taking this space.
No, go ahead, please.
Just very quickly, the way we came now to the portal quality, or I came to the portal quality in the last week, was in an attempt to kind of make sense or kind of understand how this kind of the connection in which a player or maybe a constructor of a card, possibly it was a constructor at that point of a card, stands to the situation into which they are constructing a card. And so the pointing was then to say that it's in a sense a portal between the Pekko, help me out, between the kind of simple mind of them who construct and the kind of surface of that environment, by which others can connect into either of them. And so now what you just added, Pekko, was to say that there's a portal between then also different worlds. So it's almost like a T crossing, right? It's like a relay geometric. So like, okay, so my finger only ends in one, and well, it ends also over here. So like you have an end here and you have an end here, and then you have a kind of the one who sets the portal. So they do set a portal to themselves. They do set a portal to where the scene originated from, and they do set a portal to another scenery, so to speak. And you can kind of funnel each way somehow, no? Like a T-shaped crossing. That's a bit interesting.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, it remembered me the domino also that you can.
Yeah, like how you can place the dominoes. Yeah. Hidayat, I'm giving you space because you have a time constraint.
Yes, sure. For just only this one, titling this one, or the whole game?
Or commenting on how albeit short, but the play has been so far.
The play. So the parallel and nested also, it's really amazing to me, and how the pre-conversation also affected the game. So generally the game that we are playing, it is kind of a standalone mission, when play Niched or any kind of play or domino, you start, pack, finish, but mostly anything that we played here, it has a background, it has a preparation of the conversation. So rabbit hole or foaming or parallel, so it's kind of amazed me. So so to finish, I just put the title for this one to me, and also it is another topic and layer to me. It is the unpredicted variable of motivation.
That's a good one. That's
Say
a
that
good one.
again.
Unpredicted variable of motivation.
The unpredicted variable of motivation.
Yes, for of there is no need for of unpredicted variable motivation. It is the way that generally this lottery machine or this gambling machine and the whole area is working, from the color, from the shape. So all the color, everything is unpredictable, and you cannot ask any question why LEV are yellow and Y2E, because it is a variable. So everything is kind of connected. It is a variable. You cannot predict anything. The color are not predictable. The shape are not predictable. So the machines are not working predictable. It is the way that they are sucking a lot of money. So and all of them bring the temptation and touch our motivation to try to explore it, to try to form it, to try to expand the foam actually. So yeah, when you were explaining expanding the foam, and I was asking the foam, and I recognized, wow, how much it connected even to my titling and my minding, even before I tell what is my title. That's it.
That is actually, yeah, that's a really good comment, and a couple of points. Like first, like you said, like why is the LEU yellow, etc. Like one strength in this infinity of variables is that because the framing is an act and titling is an act, it gives you control that not only allows you to pick from this infinity of variables, but then rabbit hole them to go in by your tunneling. Like you are the rabbit, you decide where to tunnel from them. But you could pick the color purple, you could pick, like Martin picked, the punched holes, etc. But then you're coming towards from there, towards generalized structure and like larger possibilities, etc. So essentially, this is giving you ways to move, dimensions to move in meaning, in semantics, semiotics, both of them. Second practical point, there is a lot in this, like starting from this sort of move-based rather than turn-based, but all the other elements here, which is kind of treating conversation as the medium of conversation and discourse as a game board, intentionally so. And it's not actually just towards conversation, but it's rather actually how many of our process interactions reflect conversations in and of themselves. So if you can figure out ways to create game-like behaviors towards that, you're opening up a lot of doors in itself towards how we process things in general. So there is an interest there. Third one, which is fairly nerdy, which relates to kind of brain science. Like, I mean, we have discovered actually in the last maybe 20 years quite a bit about the brain. Also, we don't know a lot, but we made some advancements. But one of the things is that in this economy of the thinking, saying like brain is kind of agnostic to truth by its nature. That it's actually an extra condition for the brain to say that this exists. Like it says a thing like, here's a generated picture of a bear, like a dreamlike. But then it has to add to that to say, actually, this bear image is the photograph you saw here and here. Of course, it doesn't do it in that kind of language, but isn't there like extra processes that it has to put on? So essentially, everything starts out as what we roughly could call as fiction, and then like you could almost say that it's about appearances, that the brain adds then appearances upon that, which then we start to call as truth. And we're kind of playing with that quality, that going back to this sort of generating, that we are agnostic whether this is true or fiction. We are agnostic to whether this concept-like thing exists or not. But then we can pin it Like, okay, I'm actually naming this, giving it in a way like the most meager but still useful level of existence, uh, and also connecting it to the world. And this is an interesting quality in itself, because then it's kind of bringing you closer to how you're thinking in the first place. Um, the sort of generative quality of the brain is like, I made these connections, and then it's an extra step to check whether these connections have some application of an event that has happened to you, or you have coded as something that I should take a note that the pattern exists somewhere else. So, like, all of that to say that there is a useful quality to start to mirror more this nature of the brain processing itself, or the mind processing itself. Um, to have this sort of quality that you're agnostic to the truth, and which is both about enabling creation, like, oh, we created a new thing, completely possible, because it doesn't really matter if it's new or old, but then also being able to make connections to existing things along the not conventional ways, like saying, okay, I can think about the history of foaming even if it doesn't exist, but I could start building upon that root of how, uh, let's say, Leonardo da Vinci was a foamer, um, or let's pick some philosopher. What was the foaming of Heidegger, for example? Heidegger was actually a foamer, now that I think about it.
I knew it.
Yes,
Uh,
but so that's just opening possibilities. But yeah, but I think it was a short playtest, but I think it was a very promising playtest.
yeah, so nice. I just need to point out, Becco, again that the the entryway was again through construction, and I think it's mega enjoyable and it's rich, and so I really want to try, like, taking a minute, and maybe next session, maybe setting off on with the same kind of, or like a similar excuse me, kind of set of environment representing images, and then try to kind of pre-select a couple of cards, scare quote cards, that we have, and see what happens if we throw them into them.
It will work.
Yeah, I would really like to kind of try that, to train that a bit.
Yeah, it will work, and I'm not actually worried about this at all, and the reason is kind of ecosystemic. Is that there is other reasons why this kind of mirrors the kind of conceptual realm, is that there's always possibility to create new cards, but as is true of concepts, or as it's kind of like the behavior concepts, like, over time it is beneficial that some things are coined up, some like, oh, it's nice to return to something to add to the depth of that something, which then speaks for that over time actually development of existing cards is there. It's not like in danger at all. Like, it has a natural ecosystemic pathway of developing. On the other hand, it is very important, I think, to have the doorway of always creating open, like, not to close that. So, like, because it's actually the balancing act is that you keep that doorway of creating new things open, while developing a library of things that have refinement, which is existing cards, because over time, otherwise, the what is refined would become the singular source in a way.
I think my point of concern is a bit off of that center. I understand what you're saying, and I think I think also this kind of the kind of practice, as in putting into practice the construction of new cards like we did today, is really great and like super rich. But what I'm like, and it's not like what I'm not concerned with would be refinement. What I would be concerned with or curious about rather is in some sense, in this moment as we construct things like we did today, we are at liberty of kind of pathwaying ourselves through these environments. Well, in a way, kind of you said it openly, kind of without kind of secondary constraint. So I would like what I would be curious about is how it then shapes up if we go into or like we accept this type of environmental framing and then throw in the card as a now generator or constraint or both at the same time, I guess. And what happens then? Then we have so to speak, three elements, like where we didn't use an external kind of constraint. I mean, we had the moves and so, but just like I would like to just try to say, okay, so like, okay, spool one image further, and then, what are the number of cards that we now already have? Let's pick one of those, throw them at it. What happens then?
First of all, I think it's completely possible, and it's not. I don't think it's going to be any kind of a problem even.
But it would be nice to just go through it, I think, like just to kind of rehearse it almost in a way.
Yeah, but it's also like I think so, yes. And I do think it should be included, and it's a good test to include them. Of course, now that we have only like Hedayat and you, and also trying to bring Hedayat in, it was like I had that possibility of bringing old cards if we had like the group that was all in Paimio. I probably would have introduced that. Especially over time, but I would have kept this creation part because it's important. It's the like somebody like the sort of creation of say memes or like ultimately actually as a culture becomes like sharing of mostly conventional memes. Like generally like existing patterns are something that have always a pathway of surviving. And often, actually, in the long term, that pathway it's more problematic that we are only staying in the survive, like existing things, rather than that there's too much creation.
I'm not doubting that at all. Like, and so the only point, if I were to doubt anything there, then is the word always that you use, because we don't know if what we have been making so far, that all of it is going to live. Because I'm pretty sure that some of them will turn out like more, and I absolutely and I fully even support what you say in terms of yeah, we shouldn't kind of now fold to the other side and just kind of keep now playing for like a year to come these couple of cards that we have made. Not at all. It's more really to kind of, and I guess like in terms of kind of structurally, you're also right. Getting Hedayat on the level is absolutely the right thing to do. It's still nonetheless, I would just be curious about, because it's a different constraint, so it's a different kind of degree, I guess, or what I'm expecting anyway would be that.
Yeah, like let me approach this in another way. Like the thing I'm to offer this to people, that for me is actually the one of these interesting things that should be talked about and processed still. Like because I do think it certainly contains examples of cards, but I'm almost saying example. Well, I'm saying it examples literally or cases. Cases is a better word than examples. Cases of cards. Uh, but I do think it also contains the generation. Like
For sure,
yeah,
no question.
yeah, because I've tested it, and of course that's not enough. That I just tested the existing cards, and I know it works and in some ways it's even like there are certain things where it's even kind of more powerful in the sense because you're bringing in depth. like if it's a card with a lot of development, you're bringing in depth, like you're loaning
Yeah.
depth from elsewhere. And but like the balance of the ecosystem is really there's because I mean it's a lost balance in concepts. One of the problems of concepts is that they have the same potential, but not the same social convention. That the balance of creating concepts versus staying in them uh, is I think misconstrued,
Yeah.
and it's also partly because the conventions of using concepts are so heavily reliant on others knowing the concepts and don't really have conventionalized interactions of creating new ones. Whereas here we're creating interactions that kind of allocate for creation of new ones as well. And I think it's important for the like fully fledged ecosystem wise of things. So it's this balancing like of having both sides. And I do think like maybe practically from all of this one could draw that I think it would be an interesting playtest, like said, is to have a mixture of existing cards and new cards.
But I mean, just to kind of make a small note here, and by the way, hi YouTube for looking at the two guys here arguing, or not even arguing, but
no,
having
I
a
mean it's
chat about it.
interesting.
But like,
I was thinking that it's actually interesting still, so I was
yeah,
keeping it on intentionally.
yeah, no, it's also, I think it's also like, but like, I think it's a bit of a false opposition to say that if we construct cards the way that we did today, um, is a completely different, like, or that would belong to the kind of open side of things, and then playing the card would belong to the closed side of things, because I think the whole idea and ambition of having come up with cards in one shape or the other is to be able to come up with further new concepts by way of their assistance, right? I mean, what otherwise would be? I mean, I also understand that the practice itself of engaging in the attempt to generate them is a completely stable and rich thing, as now we both have been saying. But yeah, I expect it to be a different modus, and I would just be very simple thing. I would just be curious about trying that out, not kind of making a just kind of the experience of it would be interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree with that kind of like a goal or aim for the structure itself. I'm just also wary of what does culture do with structures such as these. It usually kind of diminishes the creative side and emphasizes the existing side, like kind of institutionalization of structures, which is a very strong thing in itself. But all of
But so
that.
then I have to ask you something that I'm maybe not sure, not clear about from the very beginning. Is it then maybe, I don't know, maybe this is a bit of a back room talk now. Maybe it's not necessary not to continue the recording further. But
I mean, for me, it's still fine because we're actually kind of talking about something that is very important design-wise. Like, unless you feel that one has to kind of stop it, I think it might be interesting in itself. Or
I think it was interesting. It was definitely interesting, and I'm sure that we're continuing the conversation. But maybe it's enough for the day. It's also 2 hours now.
yeah. Okay, so okay, I'll stop the recording, which means that whomever was listening now has to dive into the secrets in other ways, like including coming to the group or whatever the way you figure out. That's up to you.